Oh, recording in progress.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Is this thing on?
Buongiorno.
What's recording
Prime,
mean? Did I break it?
I don't know, prime time for airtime or something different. That's a mystery.
Oh, man. It's good to be back. Welcome to Always Strikes Last.
Welcome back,
Yeah,
Miles.
I know.
Oh,
Back to the
man.
trio. Back to the trio. I mean, I suppose you got to pass this last time for new fatherhood. Those little things are very time consuming.
That would do it. That would be a grade A top level 5-star pass.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no. So we had the baby. He's all very healthy. His name is Teddy, and I'm sure he will be a dwarf player at some point in the future. So everything's looking up.
I told you,
Uh,
man, because you're going for it, he's going to be playing elves.
Absolutely. He has to. His middle name dictates it. Do you recall what that is, Miles? What did we
That's
decide on?
is yeah, Teddy Oathstone Breaker.
Exactly.
Benjamin.
Exactly. How you got that onto the birth certificate without Julia noticing, we'll never know.
Exactly.
But it's pretty great.
Very sly. Very sly.
Um, but yeah, thank you guys for soldiering on without me. I know it's so difficult. And if I am right, I think we left on a bit of a cliffhanger last time, whereas you guys were prepping for parts or tournaments unknown.
That's true. That's true. I
Indeed.
think Matt and I had our Always Strikes Late session where we kind of waxed poetic on our maniacal visions for our lists and our reasoning and how we hope they might play out. But that was, of course, before we entered the tournament fields that weekend. And yeah, I think maybe we would talk a bit about how those turned out, then dive into some of the other very interesting news since Adepticon has given us some things to chew on. Um,
Yes, it has. Oof.
yeah.
Oof, oof,
But
oof.
but yeah, I mean, I guess I'll keep it, somewhat short and sweet on the tournament report, at least on my front. The Cabal of the Blackened Snowflake was able to cover themselves in glory. I
Nice.
ended up winning the tournament, which was pretty fun after a great bunch of games against three great guys, and it was a lot of fun. Definitely had my brain a bit fried by the third game, and I was like felt like I was a molasses man and not moving as quickly as I needed to. But we ended up getting to the point we could kind of figure out what was going on and close out the tournament in good order. But yeah, I played a guy named Sean Cushing with Sylvaneth, first round. That was a lot of fun. He was doing kind of like the strikes and fades, some treatment, had the usual kind of business, and managed to squeak
Mhm.
that one out. I played a really great guy named Corey Begg, who's a buddy of mine. I've known for a while. The second round, and that was like a really intense game for a couple reasons I'll get into shortly. But his Iron Jaws at the end of the day were not able to sustain themselves through a number of blizzards, which is what the Cabal of the Blackened Snowflake likes to do.
Nice.
And managed to squeak that one out. And then my final game was against another friend of mine, a guy named Brian Muskoff, and we had been talking just that day about needing to get together to have a game. So of course the tournament served us up one. We were both definitely game three, end of day,
Nice.
kind of brain, but we made it through and then had a good old game. I think both of us wish we'd had like another hour and a half to kind of progress it more in the leisurely pace.
That'll
But
happen
yeah.
sometimes,
Oh yeah.
It's so hard. Yeah, the third round mush brain does set in real fast.
No, it's
And
true. And like
always
and that
second round
particular
for
one.
me. Always
Yeah, that's for
second
you.
round for me. Yep.
It does strike at different times. I don't know. I thought maybe we would follow that pattern, in our game, but just for whatever reason, like maybe it was a huge lunch we'd had. I was just like, at that point. But we soldiered through and got to got to like the end of the tournament and figured it out. But it was a very tight game because we were both trying to figure out how to not screw up and get the win and move our guys just so. So it was one of those. But he was playing OCRs and he had a really kind of interesting list, which I think Miles you might have encountered before. It was a kind of thing where it's not really a lot of bodies. It's like Catacross and Archon, a couple more Ghast units, and and the fun that is like a three Immortus guard and maybe one unit of ponies and like characters. So they're running around
Mhm.
and doing stuff and everything is like very tough, but it's not like a huge footprint on the field. And we were playing the pulse, geometric pulse in that one. So
That is
I was,
such an interesting mission and a very hard one for OBR or anybody going into OBR.
oh yeah,
They're such walls, right?
They are
it's true.
they both are and they aren't, like they're so slow and they don't have the footprint or the body count. Like everything that they touch dies, but they really can only ever be in a couple places. And they really struggle on battle tactics. So it's definitely they're in a really weird place right now in terms of playing the game.
Well, it's interesting
It's
though, because geomantic pulse works specifically for them when it comes down to it, right? Because you have
mhm,
what max three objectives that you're going to hold. You
Sure.
really need to only hold one to get 3 points on the turn because you have to hold an
mhm,
objective and hold the pulse. So that's three right there, right
Right.
away. And as long as you're holding that, you're denying your opponent the ability to get that extra two. So they can only hold
mhm.
two. So you can score three on a turn while they're scoring
Sure.
two on a turn for objectives. So OBR is actually in a really good spot when it comes to pulse. Um,
Yeah,
Outside of that, yeah, they do have a lot of problems when it comes to like multiple objective play. I think
that was
Polsto
sort
and
of interesting,
Towers
and
are like, oof, those are very, very hard to shrug OBR off of.
Hmm.
that's so true. Well, honestly, on in that particular game, one of the interesting things was just that it was Paul's, but because of his smaller footprint, my army, kind of detailed in the last episode, it's pretty much the opposite. It's like push guys onto these circles and sit there, and so I
Mm.
was able to, hold the advantage over like keeping my guys alive and just all those wall of meat warriors who deny a grand strat. I got my grand strat because the demon prince came out of the Slambo, who was the exalted hero, and you know, I would just sit in on more circles because he was a little cautious, early on because he was afraid I was going to Bellicor and mess up some battle tactics, which is a very valid concern, but it kept his Archon in the back of the field and not in there, just shifting some of those guys enough to flip that script. But no, it was a
Mm.
great game, and Ryan's a great guy, and we played some before, so I was really glad to have that game with him. And even though at the end of the day I ended up taking it, I promised him a re-rack because we're going to kind of see how that plays out again. It's really interesting to see, both the big characters, sitting there, with that footprint because it creates such density and strength in those units. So you almost don't think about it until they're in front of you with like all of the debuffs on you, all the buffs on them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, and just like the shut off of things like command abilities from the Archon, from the Morghast is like really cool. So real thinker of a game, real fun. But it was kind of like a great day of tournamenting for me. I was very happy that my weirdo list kind of worked out, but there were some moments I did not think didn't think it would. I'd be remiss in not providing two highlights and a low light before I maybe turn it over to you, Matt, on this one. So
Sure.
highlights, of course, the Cabal, the Black, and Snowflake is built around some really Blizzard obsessed wizards, and they did Blizzard a lot. The snow, the snow report for the tournament was 14 wounds on a Tree Lord, killing him. 9 wounds on a Belthanos, killing him after some other damage. My own Chaos Lord, who succumbed to his own Blizzard, 5. 3 War Piggies, about 15 damage there. A Maw Crusher, for about 13 damage there to finish it off. And then 14 damage and a big unit of Brutes. Now, so that they did the thing they like to do. They march forth in their hopefully icy themed fortress to do exactly this. And narratively, they accomplished it. But this is not to
Nice.
say it always worked. In my game against Ryan, I couldn't get a Blizzard off to save my life and actually had a miscast on a 111 or something like that with
Oh God.
a Scorch's power.
Oof.
So it wasn't shifting things the way it sometimes does. Um, and that was sort of also in companion to the other really hilarious thing that kept happening across the tournament, which is my attempts to make my grand strat very reliable. 2 times worked perfectly, and 1 time backfired spectacularly. And that was having that exalted hero survive, right? Because he's a spellcasting savant, but ideally turn himself into a demon prince reliably so that I can't fail it, and then he can fly around as an extra piece to do stuff with. So seems good in theory, right? He's an undivided demon prince. I get to get all these rolls with his conduit spell. I can hide him in the back. I can do the grand, or I guess the heroic action to roll 3 dice if I want to, or
Hmm.
I can even re-roll one because he's undivided. Like Math is there. Well, he also gets the first thing in the game roll where he just before anything happens, he gets a free roll on the table. So I took that roll the very beginning of the second game against Corey, where it's like every step is forward. There's more objectives than I like. I'm like looking at all these war pigs and I'm all Crusha, and I'm like, all right, if I can just edge them out on these objectives and hold this will be okay. This is going to be a tight game. First thing that happens, I roll double ones. And then I re-roll into a 1 with the undivided king. And so I'm like, well, failed my grand strat, and I don't have a general, so I'll be thirsty for command points, and I need to make up those points somehow. And we were both like looking at each other and kind of laughing. And it was
Nice.
like, is this a sign from the heavens? This game is definitely not going to go my way. Somehow it ended up doing the opposite with the help of the Blizzards and some good fights and great stuff. But it was a moment. Of course, the other 2 games, the Exalted Hero was again Slambo, apotheosed himself pretty quickly to Demon Hood. I was just very happy about it. So,
Nice.
I think like I'm still workshopping the names, but he either has the path of Spawnbow, where he turns from Slambo to Spawnbow, or something else for like the Exalted Demon Prince level, where like it sounds cool and rhymes. Not there yet. You guys can help me. Any listeners out there? You got to tell me what his Demon Prince sort of a riff off of Slambo should be. Rambo? That's too easy.
Yeah, we'll have to workshop that one for sure.
100%. But yeah, that was a tournament, ended up taking it, with the 3-0 and good old time. Got some store credit, which I can use later, I guess, on all this new Slaves to Darkness stuff. and that was a wrap, so 3 wins for ASL. Turn it over to you, Matt.
Congrats, Jack.
Thank you.
Matt, you went to Sparkle Party 2099 or whatever number we're up to yet? No?
Yeah, Sparkle Party 4,500.
And just for clarification, are they still counting from all the Sparkle parties that were in Warhammer Fantasy Battles? Because I remember there were a number of Sparkle parties in Warhammer Fantasy Battles.
I have no idea, to be honest.
Okay.
I just signed up and life took the wheels,
Nice. I guess.
So
I don't know.
I had probably one of the more interesting experiences I think I've had in a tournament in a long time. And I actually did horrible at this tournament. I was 1-4, which was very surprising, not only for me, but also like a good gut check on like how I want to play and what I want to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we actually started. Well, let's bring this back. So with the Always Strikes Late episode, which by all means go back and check it, people, and feel free to shoot me down in the comments about my list. But the idea of the list was to stick to a plan, and you're playing your own game. So throughout the entire tournament, I stuck to the plan right until I turned right back into a Beast of Chaos player and had to go in for one large strike on something.
Oh,
and
I see.
And each one of those games, I was either leading or on par to make sure that they weren't going to have a battle tactic for their end turn. And I threw each of those away. Each game I threw away by charging in when I didn't need to. Lost a grand strat on the last one when I could have just sat there and done nothing, and I wanted the extra points. I gave it away by charging an entire unit of squigs with half my army and failing every charge. On the second one. First one was a couple of other charges. It was basically a don't be charging army, and threw them right away. Almost every game had a very close ending, except for one. And then there was an experience that I don't think I've had in a long time in AOS. And that was the that guy moment. I actually ran into that guy. Now, I'm not going to say names, and I don't want to like call the names out on the tournaments, yada, yada, yada. But like, I haven't had a that guy moment in such a long time that I was
Was this
like,
like
why
a
am I playing? Why am I showing up? It's one of those things that just kind of derails you for the rest of your time
oh sure.
at a tournament.
You
Oh wow.
you had
And
someone
it
who was bringing two boats or that kind of thing, or
no, obfuscation. One of the things and one of the reasons why I kind of moved away from the game that shall not be named at the moment is because it
Mhm.
brought in players that wanted to win at all costs. Now, for those who don't know what a win at all cost player is, that's a person that will do whatever it takes to win, whether that's deceptive rolling, manipulation of rules when they know that you don't know their rules that well,
Ah,
or when it comes down to explaining a game, or how can we say, uh, obfuscating a rule
sure.
and then making you feel guilty about it, and then winning the game because they got the rule incorrect.
Yeah, okay. I
Oh,
think
I
we
So
can
see.
read between the lines there, Matt.
yeah,
That
Yeah,
sucks.
yeah.
so it
Yeah,
was essentially the same thing that happened to you years ago,
yeah.
Miles. Um, Only it was a basic rule that I knew, but I'd been challenging enough and just wanted the game over with, right?
Yeah.
So that being said, uh, I went and talked with the guys afterward at the tournament in our Discord. I was like, that was super disheartening, and Miles pulled the remember that talk you gave me.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
so if you do run into people like that, where they will go out of their way to bend rules, especially with people which is hilarious.
Sure.
Go to your TOs. That was a firm reminder to just always bring the TO in. If somebody's going to be a deceptive player, if you get the bad feeling about somebody, and especially if your game is just feeling negative and you can't
Mhm.
figure out why, it's usually because there's a reason you just haven't pinned your finger on it yet. Go get your TO. Just ask them to watch. For anybody who's just starting out or like needs that mental reminder, I'm giving it to you guys so I can give it to myself.
There we go.
Um, because that can put an entire damper on your tournament, as it did mine.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Every other opponent that I
it'll
had
ruin your
was
whole day.
amazing,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
it ruins your weekend.
That makes a lot of
Uh,
sense, and really sorry you had that experience, Matt. I think we're probably relatively lucky in the AOS community because, unlike certain games that shall be named, we have a reputation. I think it probably is very true to
mhm,
have players who, they might miss a rule or make a mistake sometimes, but very broadly want to have a good time with you, want to have a fair game with you, want to play the best spirit of intent to create this mutual, awesome shared experience. And yeah, someone's got to win, and tournament players like us want to win, but not at all costs. We want to win in a way which is like a celebration of the cool stuff we did in the battlefield and maybe our thinking. And
yep,
that is like such a difference. There's a bright line there before all that sort of shady stuff starts happening, like someone misrepresenting rules, hiding their dice, doing funky stuff. Ugh,
Hmm.
it just gives me the crawlies, to think about that, because that place that you were in where you're sitting there and you're saying, why am I doing this? I think that
mhm,
in the past, at one time or another, we've all had one where we've had a bad game, maybe even a casual setting, sitting like in a shop somewhere, and you're like, why am I doing this with my Sunday afternoon? Or
exactly,
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
yeah. Well, not to mention, a lot of the quote unquote evidence of misplay is ephemeral, right? There's not like a hard, smoking gun, if you will. And so you're just sort of sitting there trying to not gaslight yourself that
Yep,
something did in fact happen. Um,
yeah,
and that's really tough. And so, yeah.
but the funny thing is that afterwards, later in the tournament,
Mhm.
um, I ended up playing the leader of the gaming group and had probably the longest conversation with him because he was asking, like, what actually happened there,
Yeah.
Um, and so that became like a whole thing. And I lost that game too because I made a mistake, right? I went and
Sure.
charged in something and lost my grand strat because I was still
Hmm.
playing Beasts of Chaos when I should be playing the way the army was made. Perfect game, right? No problems there. It's
Yeah.
single players that can do that. And when you lie to a TO, don't lie to a TO, people. That's it. Just don't lie to a TO. I'm gonna let you go. But the problem is like the AOS community is so tight knit, at least up here, that like you kind of paint like you paint a target on your back now that like everybody needs to watch out for this guy. TO needs to now be at your table. You're not going to enjoy your game if you're going to be that guy
Yeah.
that goes
Yeah.
out to do that, you know? Um, yeah. So outside of that, Stormcast list was great. Almost every game was super close. Again, it was a lot of those were mine to give away.
Mhm.
The first match I did have was probably the hardest, and that was OBR on Pulse with the Manfred
Oh,
detachment thing.
the new one.
Yep,
Nice.
and to even underline this, because somehow I can't get away from the sour stuff. I'm going to spiral here real quick, guys. Follow me. Both of us were getting rules wrong, right? Both of us got rules wrong. It was against Jay, who is an amazing player, always a fun game with him. And I think he was fairly new to OBR, and was, I think he was adding an extra inch for his move. And I didn't catch on to that until end of the game. So instead of +3 to move, he was +4 to move on all his
Wow.
little guys, which is not a
Mhm.
big thing. Like, yes, he could have gotten to objective earlier, but it doesn't really matter. And I was mixing up where I was going to explode my Stormcast dudes because I thought it was immediately when they died. And I had
Mhm.
read it
Mhm.
and still mind wipe.
Yeah.
So even at the end of the game, we're like, oh, well, we got that wrong. Did that change anything? No, you still won. I still messed that up. Cool. All right. Good. Right.
Yeah.
Um, so you can still have a positive experience and get your rules
Mhm.
wrong. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from that was just go get a TO. They're gonna ruin their own lives in AOS. They don't need to ruin yours, right?
No, 100%. Well, definitely in a tournament too. Like if you're in that situation and you are in like that specific kind of like bad feeling zone, or you think it's like that, then yeah, I mean, better safe than sorry. I remember the anecdote that you were referring to before, where Miles, I think you were falling victim to one of those in the tournament, and
Hmm.
that changed the whole day, right? It was corrected in the real time, and you were able to kind of continue forth, and it was a fair play sort of thing. But if it slides past, then it's water under the bridge. It's too late to kind of like to get to the bottom of things if there really is anything there. Um, and then of course that is really in contrast to the other stuff you're talking about, Matt, where sometimes you have that game where like you are having to bring forward some rule and you get it wrong, or and maybe your friend catches and you guys fix it, or maybe you don't. Or the other person does the same thing, and hopefully it's not a material change, but if it's in the spirit of good intent without like some sort of like nefarious, malicious kind of trickery, then it's
Hmm.
that's part of the game with so many complex rules. Obviously, we want to be completely precise, and it's what we're all striving towards. But it's at least a lot better. Like I know that there are a couple of the games I had, and I won't say which tournament, but in some of the prior tournaments, I was going over them afterwards, and I realized that we'd gotten a rule wrong. I mean, there were a couple where my opponent had not understood the exact definition of the rule, and he told me it one way, and I just played it that way, but it made a material difference. But I also didn't care because I'm sure that what goes around there comes around, one time or another,
Yeah.
in attempts to get these things right.
Hmm.
I mean, and it's funny because like it really comes to how you want to approach the conversation that you're having with your player, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
essentially Age of Sigmar is a conversation between two people while you're pushing things across the board.
Mhm.
Do you want to have
Shared
a good
imaginary.
conversation, or did you just come there to be, you know,
Yeah.
there, right?
And I don't know. So we had a situation where at Six Nations this year where one of our players made a mistake in their game, and I do honestly think it was just a mistake, but was accused of misplaying intentionally, you know,
Mm,
which is a red card type offense, which
Mhm.
would have sunk the team. You know, that's all of his scores get canceled out for the whole event. That's the team sunk right there. Um, and we talked it out. It ended up, resolving itself. Life went on. It was a mistake. I genuinely think it was a mistake. But as a result, it really highlighted the need that, like, if you think you made a mistake, don't wait for your opponent to realize it. Get ahead of it. Like, you can make so much goodwill and be like, hey, I made this mistake. This is the mistake I made. Do you think it impacts the game? Would you like to change it? Because you make up so much goodwill rather than waiting for your opponent, then hoping they don't find out, waiting for your opponent to find out, and then having to backpedal. You know what I
Oh
mean?
God, yeah, 100%. And just in the frame of mind, like I think that somewhat commonly, I can't conceive of enjoying the game if like I was furtively hoping that they didn't catch some crazy advantage, which means it wasn't fairly played.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
if I don't know, like some random example, like if you went in and you were swinging like your best weapon on some thing and you thought it was 5 attacks and it's really 3, and you just killed their big thing.
Yeah.
In my mind, if I realized that like after a game, I would feel like the game was invalidated. I wouldn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know what I mean? And of course, so you have to, if you see that stuff and it's material, like raise it, talk it up. You're into shared Imagineering experience. Hopefully it's not like 15 phases later, but I mean, I'm right there with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
100%.
absolutely. Well, Matt, hopefully, the other four games were enjoyable, if not victorious, as it sounds like.
I feel like, and I'll say it honestly, the second game was where I started to catch on that, like, oh man, I am not playing to my best. And part of that was bringing the strangest list that I think I could have,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm not trying to interact. And it goes against what I've been playing for a little while, which was, Dragon Ogres, which need to charge in to get the job done.
Sure.
And so part of that was muscle memory and playing. For me, it takes a long time. I can't just look at a list and say, this is how
Mhm.
this will play and this will work, because I have to
Sure.
have like a knee jerk reaction to playing, and that has to be memorized. But it was a helpful reminder of how I want to play
Yeah.
and things that I want to focus on. Um, and again, with each game being close and each game being a defining moment where I knew that plays that I were making, were deciding the game,
Mm-hmm.
and making the wrong ones, that highlighted the right ones for the next games.
Sure.
So
That's great then.
It's a
the
good
the
learning
the idea
experience,
of
though.
it being a learning experience is much easier than just a 4-1, but the fact that it actually was a learning experience makes it valuable. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
so now we just got a new Sparkle Party invite. Just signed up yesterday,
Ooh.
just in time for me to come in, have mastered the army, and completely have new rules thrust upon us, because it's
Oh,
just late
nice.
enough that we know we're going to be in fourth edition.
Oh
Yeah.
So,
no, oh no.
so
it would be remiss for us not to talk about the ridiculous news drop that we got out of Adepticon this
Oh
week.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's a lot to absorb, right? I mean, yeah, let's sail on from tournament talk. We want to make sure we close the loop for you, dear listeners. I guess we did preserve the balance 4-4 overall, so
There
good.
we go.
yeah, we got it even.
But but let's move on to the updates, because in a few scant months, as you're kind of alluding to, Miles, none of this will matter. All of this hard-won knowledge and muscle memory could be totally different. We're throwing out the Monopoly board. We're playing chess now. We're sorry.
That's
Yeah.
right. Or, as some fear, we could be moving back to checkers.
Oof,
Exactly.
dire
Uh,
straits.
we had a good laugh in the Irish chat of what are we gonna play later this summer when the new edition comes out and it's terrible. We're gonna play 40K, and we're going through increasingly obscure minis games. So I managed to pitch Force of Virtue, which is a 15th century historical skirmish game. Uh, that's made by a guy here in Ireland. Actually, really fun. If you get a chance, go play that. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
Nice, nice. So I was for sure convinced you guys were gonna have a Helldorado club not too
There
long
we go.
after
Yeah,
that,
Heldorado's coming back.
I
They've
have
killed
been
it twice,
slowly
and we're bringing it
assembling.
back.
I've slowly been assembling a turnip 28 force, so that's where I'll probably go
There we
if
go.
if all hell breaks loose. Just
Let,
all turnips and
let's
all
let's
28 mils.
let's hope that it's not that way because
Yeah.
I know we all really like our game and it is in a great place and it is awesome. So the sort of the sentiment like, okay, yeah, the news essentially boiled down to right, it's going to be an index edition, and everyone's
Yep.
like, because this doesn't feel like the kind of edition that really needed an index edition because it's such a great place.
Mhm.
Clearly, it'll make them a lot of money because all the new books, and it is
Yeah. Yeah.
fun when everything's kind of brought down to brass tacks. It can grow up again in new ways, or the models that were gathering dust all of a sudden are cool or have a function. I do personally love that, but I also don't want the game to like feel like not AOS, and so that's what I'm a little bit question mark on. It felt like they alluded to a couple of things that they're going to keep. Like I know that they kind of talked about the double turn still being there, but maybe modifying it a little bit. So maybe it's not going to be like totally different. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah. The the bullet points I saw were basically, yeah, index edition, right? So all new war scrolls, all new allegiance abilities for the entire game.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that in its of itself usually is fun. I That tends to be when I have the most fun playing 40K. So,
Yep.
is the once in a decade 6 months of index 40K that we have.
It's fair. A
Yeah, I
time when you
feel,
had some fun playing 40K.
and to
Understood.
like completely underline that, like Index 8th edition was probably the best like 40K had ever been as far as like a rule set, I think.
Sure. I think
Um,
so. I had a good time with it.
yeah, like you could pull out any army. Some were a little bit iffy, but like still everything had that same base level of okay, cool, I can do something with this, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, whereas it
Um,
kind of got pretty off the rails in 10th. I think 10th was a big like surprise of okay, everything here looks awesome. Why does everything also feel the same? And like this game feels really monotone.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there, though. We're not here to complain about what happens in the 41st millennium.
Well, that's
Uh,
my lead in. That's my lead in. So there are three things that I think really exemplify Age of Sigmar. One, the double turn. Two, the uniqueness of a war scroll based system.
mhm.
And then there was a third one. Oh, the combat phase.
Yeah.
So um those three things, if they're able to make that unique and that be kind of the point where like a lot of decisions are being made and complexity can be thrust onto a game, which in and of itself at the core level is not a very complicated game, right?
Sure.
Like when we look at Age of Sigmar, like the core rules, there's the lawyer's notes and everything, but it's really not that complex, right? Terrain is not going to spend you 400 years trying to remember what's a
Is
tall
this
building. Can you
obscuring or
shoot
is
through
it
that, right?
heavily fortified or
Mm-hmm. War scrolls
Hmm.
provide each independent flavor because all the keywords line up to one other keyword to one other keyword, and you can create these really personable forces that
Mhm.
can either be like super fluffy and they maintain that with keywords, or you can go like ham on just really strange interactions that provide like a lot of depth, a lot more depth to the game than it seems on like top level, right? Because
Mhm.
those are unique to the war scrolls.
Right.
And then with the combat phase, the you go, I go, um, the uh, the range of combat weapons, the way that charging and all the interactions around piling in can get you on an objective, can get you off an objective, can force somebody to kind of be like left in the open, can knock somebody out of combat
Yeah.
instead of them being able to pile in, right? All of those things, I think, make are like the core core soul of Age of Sigmar, for me at least.
Yeah.
And so I think I heard a rumor that everything is going to 3 inches on the range for weapons.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to read through every single part of the release.
Sure. The one I saw was that weapon ranges are going away, and you're just either in combat or not in. Like if the guy is within 3 inches, he can fight.
Mhm.
Um, or he's not within 3 inches, so he can't fight. And that seems fair enough. We'll maybe more to it. Look,
Matt's getting nervous here. Matt's getting nervous.
there are
I'm making my
plenty
nervous
of.
face.
Yeah. It could be something like 40K where it's the front rank gets to fight and the second rank, if the models that are touching get to fight and models that aren't touching but are touching and touching get to
Hmm.
fight. You know what I mean? You could see
Hmm.
something like that. And then you still have the different like the different base sizes still matter in terms of making sure people do get to fight or don't get to fight.
Could be.
That's
Um,
fair. I mean,
there is a decent amount of haves and have-nots in terms of the combat ranges as it currently exists.
it's
So
true.
I'm not inherently opposed to taking another look at that system.
Now, I
I
guess
think it's fair.
the question would be then, like, do you think that the range system supported more interactive play?
I think it supported some very finicky play.
Finicky?
That is fair. I mean, and also like potential like tough moments or tricky moments. I mean, how often is it, right, that like you're trying to do something with like a consolidation or activation to like get into or out of a range somehow, that just adds a layer of everyone squinting at their range rulers, sometimes.
I
Yeah.
mean,
So
for me, that was always the most fun thing, right? So
yeah.
let's say I make a 9 inch charge, right? I know that I have a 4 inch range. So you can catch a lot of people unaware, right? Because you have a pile in, you have minimum 1 inch reach for your
Mhm.
weapons.
That's true.
So what you can do is you can pile in with something or get a long charge on something, and then because you've charged, you pile into the unit behind it or to the unit adjacent to it when another unit knocks that unit out, right? That for me
Sure.
is the complexity of the game that I think I'm most worried about losing is the tactical moments in like
Sure.
the combat phase. Because
I
that's where the fun stuff is for me. But I play
no.
all long cavalry bases, right? So I abuse the hell out of that as much as I can.
I don't think that we would. I don't think there's a world where that's gonna significantly change, right? Like it may be a little bit different in how it all manifests, right? But at the end of the day, this is a game about the combat phase, right? That's where the game is. I mean, we talk about the game is won and lost in the movement phase, and yes, that's true. But like,
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
game
but
is
the
also won and lost in
movement
the
phase
combat
is
phase.
what gets you into the combat phase that swings the
Yeah,
game
exactly.
or keeps you out of it, which keeps you in the game, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Like it is a movement based game, but yes, I feel like the combat is kind of what a bunch of dudes with hammers running around would want to be doing.
yeah. No, and it's really evolved to a good place where like, I remember when Age of Sigmar came out and everyone was like, "Oh, so you just smush the guys in the middle and that's it?" And it's like, "Yeah, but no." Like that's
Hmm.
actually if you did that, I mean there's some armies that love doing that and that's I guess cool for them. But you know.
Yeah, it was generally not going to work out for you that well if you were just like everything is here and I'm good to go. Oh, you go
Yeah.
now. Oh, I go now. Oh, you go now. Right. And then we did see
Speaking
a
of
big swing to shooting for a little while, which I remember the grumbles from everybody being like, "Oh, there's too much shooting in AOS," and that was what like mid late second edition,
Yeah. Well, that
and a
was.
little bit of early third, I think.
it comes and goes.
Yeah.
Um, all in all, though, they've said more reactive command points and stuff, which I'm all about. Like I think that's really good play.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Keep you
That
engaged
could be fun.
in sort of both I would love, and I don't know that they haven't said anything, but I would love to see spells sort of split out into the more relevant phases, as opposed to front loading all your spells and having a 35-minute hero phase if you're a spellcasting faction.
That's
Oh,
fair.
poor
That's
Croak.
fair.
Poor
Yeah.
Croak.
Um,
I feel like that would really benefit some armies too that really rely on it. Like Zinch specifically
sure.
is an army that could really use like more than just 18 to 24 inches of range, and that's it because they
Yeah.
can't move before they do their thing.
Yeah.
You know,
It could be pretty thematic too, right? Like I like the idea of like a Saint Wizard teleporting themselves and then casting a shooting style destruction spell or a buff spell in combat in the nearby unit. That feels like you're reading the novel that someone write about like a Saint Wizard rather than
Mhm.
kind of the arbitrary hero phase. Oh no, good thing you were 19 inches away. He's powerless against you.
yep,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Stuff like that would be nice to see. I would imagine they probably will split it up. My biggest fear, to be 100% honest right now, is that
Mhm.
moving away from War Scrolls as a unique identifier for units, right? And replacing those with USRs. Now, there's nothing really wrong with USRs. I mean, we've all been playing long enough that USRs are something that we very
We've
dearly
played at least one
missed.
game with
Yeah.
USRs at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and very dearly missed for like a couple of different games over the
Hmm.
course of the time, right? But also there's a certain amount of kind of like, oh, that unit does that. Okay, cool. It's got that USR. Okay, cool. That's what that does. Okay, cool. Right. As
Yeah.
opposed to, well, this unit, can now, if in unique war scrolls, let's say, and first thing, just random thing that pops to mind. Cities of Sigmar have what are they? Dark Riders, and
Sure.
they can leave combat when they retreat from combat. They can still shoot or charge, and they get
Okay.
+1 to shoot when they retreat. Now, when moving to USRs, we usually see these kind of things like lumped into a different thing, right? And we
Sure.
lose that kind of extra layer of zhuzh.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with
Yeah.
zhuzh.
I'm not super worried about it. I mean, to counterpoint what you're saying, remember in second edition where we had to go through and clean up all of the text for every time there was a teleport because they all had different wording and it
Oh
was
yeah.
confusing. And sometimes you could do it out of combat and sometimes you couldn't. And
And well, generally we still have that problem with some things. They have been cleaned up. Like Stormcast
yeah,
still have that, right? Stormcast, the army that I played, hunters can't teleport out of combat, but Paladors can, and so the like stuff like that still exists, but it's
yeah.
unique to the War Scroll. And if hunters could just teleport out of combat, that would probably be broken. To be
It's
100% honest, for a 100-point unit.
There is sort of like a middle ground, I think wouldn't be the worst. I mean, I like the variations, right? I mean, if there are like special teleports, that's fun, right? I think it's boring when there's just one kind of teleport called teleport keyword and it's
Mm-hmm.
sure.
on there and everyone and they never deviate from it because then it's like a little bit too predictable. It isn't that flavor country as we talked about.
Yeah.
But they can still have the war scroll and have either the keyword on or have a special ability which replaces it. Just makes it so like a better version.
Yeah, and again, like I love USRs. Pretty much every other game that I'm interested at the moment has USRs. Like whether it's Legions Imperialis, Old
Mhm.
World, Horus Heresy, all of that USRs,
Mhm.
right? And so it's more the way that it's handled, I think, will kind of define how people approach it. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's reasonable to set our expectations that the index war scrolls will be less flavorful than the current ones
oh yeah,
because that's how index war scrolls tend to work. Um,
and and I think that's probably going to be. I think that's the biggest underlying fear that I actually. There's two underlying fears that I
yeah.
have of the game. One is that just like Eighth Edition 40K,
Hmm.
As we move forward, those index armies will be the best balance that the game has ever had, right?
Sure.
And probably the most fun. And the second is going to be how they approach terrain. Terrain is the next thing that I'm actually kind of worried about.
Hmm.
And it's one of the reasons that when 10th edition 40K came out, I was
Yeah.
extremely excited for it. I was like, wow, this looks like this is going to be really good. They
Yeah.
have a unique individual rule for each one of the, what do they call them? Battle scrolls or war scroll, their version of
Yeah.
war scrolls. While they were also supporting it with USRs. But the terrain rules were um, were kind of strange. The fact that now a
Yeah,
flyer
yeah.
has to go like this to measure
Yeah.
its movement, the fact that they still didn't fix the
Matt made a
underlying
zigzag,
problem.
sorry, with his hand.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, we
Yeah.
can
for
actually
everybody at
put
home.
we can put the video up. I don't know. We can put the video
It's
up for this one.
possible,
We can't
yeah.
put the video up on Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts or where.
Oh
Nope,
yeah,
nope.
yeah. Which is why you should subscribe on YouTube.
Oh my God.
Hey.
Oh, good plug,
Um,
good plug.
so the
See all the crap in my house.
yeah, yeah, especially the box on it over his
Yeah.
shoulder. So like the terrain problems that came out of 40K made it not it doesn't make much sense if you kind of like sit and think about it like longer than 5 minutes and try and reconcile the competitive play problems that are introduced when you have a thing that just ignores terrain as it flies.
Mhm.
Sure.
In a game that has maxed out like let's kill everything from range,
Yeah.
right? And then there's other things like just the way that you interact with terrain in a competitive setting. And by that I mean every map has now translated or has turned over to city fight in 40K. So you're playing a game of city fight. If you want to play at a tournament, you're going to be playing a game of city fight. And if you want to have a casual game with somebody who plays a lot, they're going to be playing normally competitive, right? They're not going to be doing anything else because they want to go to tournaments. 40K is their main thing. That's where
Sure,
you get
sure,
the
sure.
most games against people outside. So you're going to be playing competitive maps, which means you're always going to be playing city fight. My worry with Age of Sigmar is they're going to transfer over this kind of like obviously not city fight, but this kind of bog standard placement for terrain and the rules for how it interacts. And they're going to
Mhm.
lose kind of some of the fun that you get out of having more room to breathe on the board, right?
Yeah, I mean,
That
they've
makes
done a
sense.
pretty good job with currently the terrain needs to be a certain distance apart from each other, and there's really only four kinds of terrain when you really boil it down.
Oh yeah.
There's garrisons, there's impassable, there's area, and there's line of sight blocking.
But that's currently. And what's
Yeah,
one
I'm
of
just
the
saying.
biggest things that we hear from a lot of people is like, oh, I wish the terrain rules were more fleshed out, right? That's one of the things we hear a lot of from people. And it's like,
Well,
okay, so,
and
what are they gonna do? It's a
and yet,
fear.
yeah, that has not been anywhere in any of the verbiage that they've announced so far. So that's kind of interesting. So maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
Could be hidden, could be hidden. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I guess we'll see on it. I mean, I hear what you're saying there, Matt. I mean, I do think that when the game that shall not be named anymore came out with some recent iterations, I found the terrain rules particularly hard to parse and sometimes counterintuitive and not fun because it felt like a pile of USRs sort of arbitrarily assigned to stuff that you couldn't see or understand as being inherent to the thing itself. If you weren't like flipping through the book and like read it,
Mm-hmm.
it felt like it'd be
Yeah,
better in a
okay.
video game where I tooltip over it and it would tell me like the 7 things it was doing based on how it had been assigned. So I didn't like it. Um, but in the converse, I guess there is some argument that in AOS, you have the mysticals or whatever you can roll for the terrain, but beyond that, it's fairly cosmetic except for the physical footprint impeding stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not impassable, which is cool. I mean, it keeps things streamlined. There's still some play. You can do some clever things, like set your guys up in terrain to get better armor saves. It's not nothing. But maybe there's a middle ground, right? When like they somehow make the terrain features come alive so that they feel like the sort of thing that they are and giving you some kind of advantage or disadvantage. Like running through a swamp shouldn't be nothing, you know, fighting amongst the trees shouldn't be nothing. If they can find a way to actually reflect that so it's easy to remember and makes sense and creates a balanced map, I'm all for it. But, you know, I don't want to go full game that shall not be named style
Sure.
thing. That would be
And
unpleasant.
I will
Yeah.
say, like, you know, I know there is a lot of trepidation in terms of what's going to happen because there's a lot of unknown, right? It's a lot of new. They've decided to overhaul stuff that you're like, wait, why are we overhauling stuff? So, but at the same time, this is the design studio that like took Age of Sigmar 3 and got it to where it is now. And where it is now is really, really good.
This
Yeah.
is true. This is not
Yeah.
the same guy who made Age of Sigmar 1.
Yeah, I think he got fired or let go or something. I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah.
But
They
before
sent
he
him,
left, he sealed the rule for that we need to have double turns in blood and into the basements of GW so that they can never be removed.
he did that.
That's
Thank
right.
God. The double turn is the best.
Um,
The-
but yeah, I mean, you look at like even by their own stats, almost every army is within the 45 to 55% win rate. You
Mhm.
know, there don't really feel like a ton of factions that are just out and out losers, you know, like there have been in other times that we've been playing, you know.
Mhm.
I know I'm excited for Worlds this year because it's going to be this culmination of third edition, and so that'll be really fun. It'll kind of be the final moment for it, I think, in a lot of ways. And so going into that and not having like, yeah, there's a bunch of armies that are like strong, but there's not a ton of armies that are like wouldn't consider them weak.
Yeah, no, I
Yep.
agree. And I think that may be like the most trepidation from people that I'm hearing from like our local gaming groups and even a little bit of mine myself. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
the game is almost perfect. Like I think we're all just kind of sick of the GHB now.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the
New
only
new
thing.
GHB for sure.
Like that's the only thing right now that like um you know that is really kind of standing out is like, wow, you've finally got this game through the facts and everything else that are needed to it's an airtight game, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the idea of blowing everything up is probably a little scary, I would say.
Yeah.
But all in all, I'm still looking forward to it. There's always going to be hiccups. They've confirmed that we're going to get that second turn. If that which shall not be named, its 10th edition release is anything to go by, we will have, you know, USRs with individual flavored war scrolls, essentially.
Yep.
And, you know, hopefully that third strike of combat can actually be dealt with in a way that really focuses the game around that. And we don't get 40K with double turns, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's 2 out of 3 ain't bad, right? So,
Well, here's hoping. At least we know the story is going to be fun, advanced with some scavenous things and actually. But let's dive into that one next time. I think we've come to a pretty good stopping spot, you know, for today. You know, plenty more to chew on with that.
There we
Unless
go.
you guys have
We've
anything
come to a
else.
good place, as they say.
Yeah.
yes, yes.
No, sounds good. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks everybody for listening. Made it all the way to the end, as always. We appreciate that.
Absolutely, absolutely. As usual, guys, you know, like, subscribe, share with your friends. You know, let us know any feedback you have about how things you'd want to hear, or maybe that you would like us to go into more depth on or change up for the future series. And just, you know, thanks for being here.
Yeah, appreciate y'all. And I get the last word.